We are going to begin with an already nasty race for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. The race is for the seat in the 26th Congressional District. Here it is on the map. It stretches from Westchester to Miami-Dade to Key West, a toss-up district in terms of voter registration. It has been represented for the last 2 years by Joe Garcia, a Democrat, but he doesn't really enjoy the usual advantages of incumbency. He has been weighed down by the jailing of his former chief of staff and campaign manager for absentee ballot fraud. Garcia has not been charged in that scheme. He says he knew nothing about it. Carlos Curbelo is the Republican nominee in this race. He won more than 50% of the vote in the primary election against 4 other opponents. Mr. Curbelo heads a political consulting firm, Capital Gains, and was elected 4 years ago to the Miami-Dade County School Board. Carlos, good morning.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you for this opportunity.
We're grateful to have you here. So who are the clients of Capital Gains?
Well, look, that is the only available strategy to an incumbent congressman whose chief of staff went to jail for absentee ballot fraud. That is a fact that the Garcia campaign committed fraud in the 2012 election, and now we see that Joe Garcia has his own Justin Lamar Sternad. That's Rolly Araujo, the straw candidate that the Garcia campaign recruited and apparently illegally financed in 2010. So that is why they have had to generate this crisis for me when, Michael, I report not 1 but 2 financial disclosure forms every year, a state one and a federal one. Joe Garcia just files one. And when a lot of the work I do, and you know this because you've interviewed me, is done in front of the cameras and on the record.
We know who many of your clients are. You have worked for Lincoln and Mario Diaz-Balart. You have lobbied for Ginseng. It's not really a secret, but the fact of the matter is, Allison Tant, the chair of the Florida Democratic Party, this week wrote to the U.S. Justice Department and said, you may be in violation of civil statutes, not criminal. She said, if it's criminal, follow that lead. But she is asking justice to investigate. Is that just a political ploy, or what is it?
It's a frivolous letter. Their candidate is under investigation. It was on the front page of the newspaper on Wednesday. That's the same day that she happened to fire away her letter to President Obama's Justice Department. If they want to investigate, they're welcome to investigate. We know that we follow the law, and, Michael, we invite Joe Garcia's campaign to start following the law, because
where have they violated the law?
Well,
or not followed the law?
Absentee ballot fraud. Well, he pleaded guilty. Rolly Araujo. A lot in the media, Michael, are opening their eyes to the fact that Rolly Araujo is the Justin Lamar Sternad of the Garcia campaign.
There are many questions about Mr. Araujo, who was a roommate, a close friend of Jeff Garcia, no relation to Joe. And Jeff Garcia was the campaign manager, and it was he who went to jail for 3 months because of absentee ballot fraud.
And by the way, Jeff and Joe Garcia lived together in Washington, D.C. as well. So when the congressman says, I knew nothing, it's questionable. And by the way, Michael, the congressman has hired one of the top criminal defense attorneys in the country. If you don't have an issue, why would you hire a criminal defense attorney?
Well, we will ask him, but maybe that's just a wise thing to do. Well, let me just, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but Capital Gains is the company that you founded in, 2001, I think?
2002.
2002. And your campaign has described you as a principal of the company. You have in the past been referred to yourself as the president. What is your role with Capital Gains?
Michael, I'm very proud of the business that I built. In 2002, right out of college, I founded this firm. The firm does public media relations. We've worked some of the clients you mentioned, others like Mount Sinai, others like the Florida Chamber of Commerce. We've done a lot of work over the years, and I'm very proud of that work. In 2009, when I went in to work for the United States Senate, the attorneys at the Senate said, you must divest from your company because we don't like our employees to have an active role in any business. So that's why I did that long before I decided to run for office. Again, Michael, this is a crisis that the Democrats have decided to generate because they're dealing with a real crisis of Joe Garcia and his investigation.
And again, you did work for George Lemieux, and he is going to be a guest later on the roundtable. I'm sure he is watching this with interest. But when you stopped working for him, when he left the Senate, why didn't you return Capital Gains to the same status as before, where you listed yourself as the president, not your wife. Your wife doesn't really work at the firm.
No, she's raising our daughters, and I'm very proud of that. And Michael, there was no need to. I went back to the firm. I didn't hide the fact that I went back to the firm. I represented companies on the record. You interviewed me. Others have interviewed me. I'm proud of what I've been able to build for me and for my family. And I reject this frivolous attempt by Mr. Garcia and his campaign to generate a crisis for me just because he is dealing with a very real crisis, which is the FBI's investigation into his campaign.
Right. Carlos, let me ask you, describe yourself on the political spectrum. Would you say that you are a deep red Republican, a kind of a more moderate Republican, kind of a purple Republican, pragmatic, ideological? How do you describe yourself?
Michael, I'm a middle-of-the-road Republican. I like to get things done. I'm like Ronald Reagan used to say, I don't consider that just because someone doesn't agree with me on 20% of the issues, now that person is my enemy. I believe both parties have to come together and reach bipartisan solutions. And I am willing to take on my party. I've done it on immigration reform. I've done it on education standards.
On Common Core.
Absolutely.
I mean, let me ask you about Common Core. You've served, and I think served well, for 4 years as a member of the Miami-Dade County School Board. And you have not run away from the Common Core state standards, despite some problems with them. Why do you believe in Common Core?
Michael, the problem is not with the standards. The standards are good, and I see them in action in our classrooms. The standards really help children develop the critical thinking skills, be able to answer questions, defend their answers, express themselves, become free-thinking, independent citizens that don't have to depend on the government or on anyone else. Right. The problem is in the testing, and we do have some real complaints here. I know the superintendent has discussed this with you.
He has.
We don't know what the test is going to look like. So to grade schools and to impose penalties on teachers for the performance of students on a test, which we still haven't seen, is somewhat troubling. But the standards are important. We cannot have a world-class education system in this state or in this country without high standards.
All right, let me move on. Just to kind of give me a yes-no answer, if you could. Things like the Keystone XL pipeline. If you're a member of the House and that comes up for a vote, how would you vote?
That's a yes. It creates jobs, and it helps us become energy independent in this continent. It's very important.
Right. And what about the immigrant? This will take more than a yes or no. What about the immigrant children? 67,000 of them who, they've slowed down to sort of a trickle lately, but these children are here. They're in these, temporary facilities, including, and I guess, close to 4,000 in our state of Florida.
Yeah, Michael, these children are victims, and that's what everyone has to understand. They are the victims of the coyotes, they're the victims of the corrupt governments of their countries, and in some cases they're the victims of their families who send them on these dangerous journeys to the United States. So I'm for all of these children receiving due process under the law, hearings where they can be heard, and those that have legitimate asylum claims should be allowed to be treated as refugees in the United States. Those that don't should be reunited with their families in their home countries. That's the responsible thing to do. We have to treat these children humanely with the dignity that they deserve, but we cannot send the message that the U.S. border is open and invite more children to embark on this dangerous journey that can cost them their lives. Some of them get raped.
Certainly dangerous. Yeah. No, it's a awful situation, both at home for people, these children in Honduras and Guatemala, El Salvador. Carlos Curbelo, have many more questions, but let me ask you, I know you're going to say yes, but let me formally invite you to come sit opposite Joe Garcia here on This Week in South Florida and let the people of the 26th District and beyond hear you.
Let's do it next week.
Well, let's wait a couple of weeks closer to the election.
Okay, well, you understand how I feel about it.
I do indeed. Carlos, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you. All right, let's now go to